cloud. Okay, so this way, I'm going to real quick go over a couple of the things that I did in class the other day because demonstrating it was not clear. And I also didn't record it, so it's kind of good to record this now. So the other day we talked about the arrow. I'm not going to go and do the exact measurements like I did in class the other day, but you can see in the schematic and the instructions for the arrow how exactly that gets done. It's similar to like this. You go here, there, like straight across, up, across, down, and up to 0 again. All right, so we're just going to do that. Let me make sure that I got that all in a line. Probably not. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this whole thing, move it up a little bit. Actually, I'm going to. So look at my O snaps. I have them turned on down here. I have near. That's important because I'm good, and also end. So I'm going to move this. And instead of just clicking on it and dragging it, I'm going to be real precise about moving. And when I want to move things precisely, I type in the move command, M-O-V-E, because that allows me to go from one O snap to another O snap. So I'm going to take the end of this and I'm going to move it up and move it right to, I'm going to click on that. So that's the point that I'm moving from. And now there's the point that I'm moving to. And you can see that, yeah, this looks like it actually does go right to the end, but I'm going to click on this and I'm going to move it past just so that I know that this whole arrow is going to have a similar axis for rotation. All right, and this, but in the example, I believe it was up a little bit. Now that I think of it, so let's turn on grid snap for a minute. I don't normally like to use grid snap, but we're going to use it in this case because I know that this arrow is supposed to have a central shaft above that the shaft of the arrow. Okay, so the first thing that it had us do was mirror. I'm going to mirror this. I typed in the mirror command. There's copy. Yes, you can, if you wanted to mirror something and not have it be a copy, you can change these this option here for copy. You can also decide how it's going to mirror, or you can just put in your inputs to make the mirror plane. So because I have the end O snaps on, I'm going to click here, then I'm going to click over here, and that is one arrow. I'm going to join it. Or actually, before I do that, I'm going to copy this out. Remember, that was one of the things we did. I'm not going to show that third arrow here in the demo because that's kind of an optional arrow. If you guys don't have it in your final assignment submission, don't sweat it. That was kind of meant to be a can you figure it out kind of thing. All right, so I've got these two curves here. What am I doing here? I'm going to drag over the two of them to select them. Remember, there's a couple different ways to select things. If you drag from left to right, it's anything that is completely contained in the window, like only the top there. But if you drag from right to left, it's anything you touch. So we touch the two ends of that. So there we go. Both of those are selected. I'm going to hit the join command. It's over here. It looks like puzzle pieces. You could also type in join. Oh, it broke history. I use history a lot. And I'll demonstrate the power of that to you later, but I like to leave it on. So here we're going to take that joined curve and we're going to extrude it solid, extrude planar curve straight. And we're going to make that 1 inch thick. Wow, that's thick. Whew. All right. And I'm going to make this ghosted. I like to see things ghosted because then you can tell if they're solid or not. But you can still see through to the other side. That's cool. All right, so now this one was a revolve. R-E-V-O-L-V-E, revolve. The axis for the revolve, we're going to click here in the top viewport and click here. And then over here in the right viewport or in the front viewport, we can see where it's rotating. But if we do this over here, this is going to be like really, well, we already put in the axis, so it'll be all right. But there we go. We're going to hit enter for the 0 start and then revolution angle 360. And there we go. That's that arrow. You can see my arrow's a little weirder than the other one. That in the example, if you actually use the schematic. So now we're going to bend this arrow. BEND is the command right here. Go to there. And then depending on the viewport we're in, we can bend it lots of different ways. I'm going to bend it from the top viewport. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. Zoom in this way. We're just going to go like, okay. That's fine. So, and how do we twist this guy? We use the twist command, TWIST. And over here, I'm going to twist starting, I want to twist in the very center of this. So I'm going to make sure my mid snap command is on. And over here in the, and here, I'm in the front viewport. You see how I can see where my cursor is in the right-hand viewport? It looks like it's midway up, but in the top viewport, it's right in that notch. And in the perspective viewport, you can see that it's halfway up that notch. And you can also see that in the front viewport. So I'm going to click right there, and I'm going to hold down the shift key in the top viewport until I get to the end. And I can see in the right viewport that that line is straight because it only looks like a dot. So I'm gonna, and you can see in the front viewport, it looks like it goes out level. So I'm gonna click. And now here in the twist, I just made the axis for what it's gonna twist around. Like a lot of Rhino commands, when you use some of these transformational commands, you want to allow it extra time so that you can play with it. If you know, you might like bending things this way or bending it the other way. This is one of those commands where you might want to play with where your mouse is, where you start. Like I'm going to start this off at like 9 o'clock in the right-hand viewport. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to turn it 180 degrees. Notice I still have grid snap on, so my cursor is actually snapping to the grid. I'm going to hit OK, and there we go. I twisted that. All right. So that's just a rough idea of how to do those two. And if that's all that you guys get submitted, that's fine. I wouldn't worry about that third arrow with the polar array. You could try it if you want. And actually, if you can do it, that's great. But yeah, so this is the arrow. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that chair. So I'm not going to save these changes. I'm going to open up the chair file. And I'm going to real quick go through the frame with this again so that you guys can see elevator mode. This sometimes takes a little while to get. Elevator mode doesn't feel real intuitive. But so basically we're creating the pipe frame of this. We have 3 reference photos that are set on a picture plane using picture. Right now they're locked. If I unlocked them, then we could edit them. Okay. And okay, I guess Olivia had to. Okay, welcome back, Olivia. All right, so if we had to, you know, edit the photos, we could do that. I'm going to undo, and I'm going to lock these again, because when you bring in a reference photo and you bring it in as a picture, there's another command too called background bitmap that can allow you to bring in a picture. And once you set it in Rhino, it's not as easy to edit. You can edit it, but you don't want to as much use background bitmap. But picture is also very helpful because you can do it. You can have several of them, like in this case, and we've got 3. I'm going to do the pipe using a polyline. We're going to fill at the edges later. I'm going to take off that center O snap because it's centering to the middle of that picture. So I'm going to start back here at the end. Then over here, I'm going to, because I'm working in the front viewport, I'm working on the ZX construction plane. Remember, we talked about construction planes on Monday as well. Here we go. I'm just going to go there. Now over here in the, in order to follow this pipe, we would go to the back of that image. And here we go. We're going to go here. Now here's where it gets tricky. I want this to be somewhere in the air right here, or at least that's where it looks like it's in perspective. But you can see how perspective viewport can be very deceptive when you're just moving your mouse around. This is why it's important to watch where your mouse is in your other viewports as well. So right now I'm going to bring it up to this here. And it is snapping to that point, but that's not where I want it to be. But I want it to be at that level, just on the other side of the chair. So I'm going to hold down, actually, I'm going to take off grid snap too. I'm going to hold down Control before I click, Click. Now you can see in the perspective viewport what I can do with this. I can stop anywhere on that line, and it'll be directly opposite of that, that point in the front of the chair on the right-hand side of the chair. Now, right here, where I have this O snap coming up in my top viewport, see this here? It says end point and intersection. We're going to click there. I can see in my perspective viewport and my right viewport that that's where I want it to be. So now I'm going to click. All right, that's great. So the next spot I want it to be exactly opposite of this point here that I can see in my front viewport or my perspective viewport right here. See where I'm at right here? So if before I click though, I'm going to hold down the Control key, I'm going to click, and I'm going to move across to the others. Oh crap. Looks like I clicked it when it was in the wrong viewport. Actually, I was in the perspective viewport. And if you're in the perspective viewport, when you Control click, there's no telling which way it's going to go, because perspective, as I said, can be very deceptive. So I'm going to go over here to the front viewport. I'm going to hold it over that point again, and I'm going to click again. And now that's where I wanted it. That's the plane that has constrained it to where that point is. I can hold it over here. You can see how it goes to end. That's where I want to click. Now I can click here. That's where I want it. And I'm going to click over to here. Now I have this. If we go to the properties panel, this should be a closed curve. Let me hide the zoom thing here. It's a closed curve. Now what I can do here is I can get rid of my layer, or I can hide those pictures, and you can see here what we were able to do. We could fillet the curve or fillet the corners here. We'll do that. I'm going to hit enter. The fillet radius, let's go with 1. And there we go. We've got a nice little, 1 is actually a little bit, let's undo that. Let's do it again. Remember, if you right click your 3-button mouse, you will repeat the last command that you did. So let's make that fillet radius, let's make that 1.5. Wait, what? Not 12.5, 1.5. There we go. And that looks a little better. Now let's go pipe. P-I-P-E. It's asking me for a radius. Do I want that to be 1? No, I would like a diameter of 1. Okay. There we go. Ooh, that's skinny. Man, I hope that's really strong steel. Let's undo that. Let's do the pipe again. And let's make that 2. Yeah, that's better. That's more like it. In the meantime, we could put that seat on the construction plane. Actually, I don't think that it has you do the pipe until after you've done the construction plane, but this is just a quick review of the stuff I showed you Monday in class, and this way we could record it for posterity and for the rest of the semester at least. So there's that. Do we have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so I can take a look at what we have. Do we have any questions about what I just showed you in terms of the arrows or the chair, especially the modeling in 3D space using elevator mode. Okay, none? Alrighty, great. Well, let's get to some fun stuff here. I would like to show you how to do some patterns. Let's just delete this. Oh, wait, I'm in the chair. Let's just open up a new one. I'm not going to save those changes. So I'm going to work in small objects inches. I'm doing that because I think in inches. If you're a person who thinks in millimeters, then work in millimeters by all means. If centimeters are where you feel like, you could totally sit there and mark out, several centimeters easily on a piece of paper and you fully understand centimeters, by all means work in centimeters. But generally here in MJCC, we tend to work in either inches or in millimeters, especially for 3D printing. So those are the two main units that I would suggest you work in. Always open up small objects, at least when we're working with jewelry. So I'm going to start in the top viewport, and that's, come on, double click. What's going on? Okay, there we go, top viewport. So if I was going to do some patterns, I like doing patterns. They're kind of fun. I'm going to start with some basic geometry. I'm going to use a circle. I'm going to put the center of that circle at our origin point, which is 0, 0, 0. That's 0 in the Y, 0 in the X, 0 in the Z. I'm going to hit enter. That's the middle. The diameter, let's make that diameter 5 inches. Okay, I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so I have this circle. That's kind of cool. Now, let's say I wanted to do some sort of a, radial pattern. And now I'm going to go to a polygon. I have my quad snaps on. This is what our quado snaps do. They kind of set up things on the compass points.
Sharing your screen.
Oh, phooey. Thank you for unmuting. Oh my goodness. That's right. We were talking and I appreciate you doing that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I got that far before anybody said anything. I can't see the chat, by the way, when I'm sharing or when I'm working in my Rhino screen, obviously. All right, let's do this again. Here we are. Oh my goodness, thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right. Ooh, and I'm starting with that polygon. I'm so sorry. So here's our quad snaps. I'm gonna do a polygon. The quad snaps end up in the, at like the compass points or, the clock points, 12, 3, 6, 9. I know you guys are, post-analog clock generation, but that's okay. So let's say, how many sides do we want? In the polygon command, you can change how many sides. Let's make this 5. We're going to make pentagons. And I've got one pentagon here. We know about the offset, right? Offset is where you offset curves. This is 5 inches. If I offset right now, it's only offsetting 0.042. That's very, very tiny. If I wasn't sure how big that was, remember in Rhino, you can zoom in, that's 0.042, that's tiny. So this is where it's helpful to have a set of calipers. And if you have calipers, let me let's see if I can, yeah. I was trying to show you guys the calipers, but no, here we go. This is a set of calipers. You could just see it in my little screen. But what you could do with that is you could turn it on. You always want to reset it to 0, then open it up to 0.42. All right, that is open to 0.42. Look how tiny tiny, tiny, tiny. That's not acceptable for this design. Let's go with 0.5. I want this to be a ½ an inch out. Okay. Yeah, maybe a ¼ inch, 0.25. No. 0.25. There we go. ¼ inch is nice. And if I'm working in inches, you can see this grid in the back. I can see I have 1 inch for the heavy lines, and then these lighter lines are a ¼ inch. You can actually change the settings of how you want the grid. That can be done up here in Tools, Options, and here's 1.5 million options. So you can have a grid line count of 200. The minor grids are every ¼ inch, major grids every 4 minor grids. So, and the grid snap is ¼ inch. You can change that around, as you can see. So I've got these two curves here. And what I'm going to do is something called a polar array. It's array polar right here. And what we do with a polar array is it arrays things in the round. I just turned on my center O snap. Remember, the center O snap works a little differently than other O snaps. Usually with other O snaps, you hover your mouse near them, but with a center O snap, you have to hover around the edge of whatever it is you want to find the center of. So that's when it comes up. You see how I have the CEN and then the point clicks to the middle. So if I click, there's the center. And what I was looking for was the center for this command, array polar. So how many items do I want to array? Well, if I leave it at the default, which is 3, and again, just like those rotate commands that we were using, revolve or twist, it was asking about angles. This says 360. And if I hit enter and it fills 360 with 3 pieces, that's what I get. That's kind of cool. All right, let's take this and undo. Let's do that again. Remember, you right click your right click mouse button and it'll bring up the last command that you used. So let's go here. Instead of 3, let's go crazy. Let's make it 16. Okay. Wow, look at that. That's pretty interesting. So we're going to hit enter and look at all these really cool. But suppose I was thinking that it'd be really fun to have these all connected, and then maybe after I cut this, I could use it as a bracelet or something like that. Just a flat bangle. So I have shown some of you how to use the trim command. Like for instance, if I use the trim command, by the way, that's over here. You select a cutting object. Let's select this pentagon here. And then when you are finished with the cutting objects, you hit enter. Then you select what you want to trim. We could trim out this, we could trim out this, we could trim out this. And you could see how we could use that command to go along and click and remove parts of this design that we don't want, that overlap or whatever. And we hit enter when it's done. Trim command broke history. I'm going to say undo because I don't really want to do that. There's an easier command for me to work with many pieces at once instead of going through and having to go trim, split, or trim and split and delete, or and this command is found in the curve edit tools, and it's called curve Boolean. With this, you can work with multiple curves at once. So I'm going to select all of these curves. It says press enter when done. But before I do, let's look at these options in the command line. We have delete input, none. Don't delete any of them. We also have output being curves. That's fine. what are the other options? Output could be surfaces. Ooh, that would be cool. Or, yeah, surfaces or curves. Simplify the curves, yes. In that case, it will, if possible, make fewer points on the curves in order to keep our geometry simple, and all regions versus just click inside regions to keep. Now here, by clicking on that, it automatically put an outline around the whole thing, which is actually good because that's sort of what I wanted. And here I like the interior. And now what I think I want is just something like this. Or do I want both sides of this? You know, what do we, oh, I didn't want to do that. Or maybe I did. Actually, that's kind of interesting. If I did it that way and go with that one, and then over here this, and then every third one, we'll take out every two. And then here we go, we got that. We're gonna take that off. Wow, isn't this fun? I don't know, I think it's fun. Every other one is there. And then here, then we got this. Okay, cool. And here we go. I don't know, so now if I hit enter, you see how I have curves selected? It's kind of messy looking. While everything is still selected, I like to take the gumball and move it off. So look at this pattern that we just made from all of this. Things can get really complicated, and you can have a lot of fun with curve Boolean because you don't have to go through all the trouble of figuring out, you know, should I split this area? Should I trim this? How do I get what I want? Because curve Boolean gives you that visualization of what is contained in the final outcome. You know, you can just kind of play while you're going along. Do we have any questions about curve Boolean? Do you want to see another example? Yes, no, unmute yourselves. Let me see if I can see this.
Show just one more.
Sure, absolutely. So let's do something with a different kind of array. I like arrays. Arrays are good because you can totally, I'm going to do a polygon here. We got these 5-sideds, right? 5-sided is kind of fun, but let's go with triangles instead. Let's go 3 sides. Enter. And we got this. And let's offset again. That's a 1/4 inch. And now let's use a regular array. So we haven't gotten into the array command yet. It's actually in next week's homework. But array allows you to create multiples. We used a polar array because it created multiples around in a polar pattern around a pole. So what a regular array does is it moves things in a rectangular way. So it says number in X direction. What it's asking me for, remember, you can see down here, you can see the YX. So X is this direction. How many do I want? Let's say I want 10 in that direction. And in the Y direction, let's say I want 5. So that's 50 triangles. What about the Z direction? Wait a minute. Z direction. So if I was using solids, I could totally, I mean, because I'm working in curves, I probably don't want anything in the Z direction. So I'm going to leave that at 1, but I have to have something. You can't make that 0 because then you're going to have nothing. So the number in the Z direction is 1, and we're going to hit enter. Now, the unit or cell spacing. What we want to do is we want to click, and then we can start to move these out. I'm going to go back to just the top viewport. Let's see what we have here. And what's fun about array is we could just, by moving my mouse around, I can get a different feel for how these are intersecting one another. Look, we could leave it like that. We could also, I sort of like this one. All right. enter. Okay, so that's a preview. When you see pink like that, Rhino is saying, hey, this is what I got. Is this what you want? Because that's what we got. If you don't want that, you can hit escape and it'll cancel. If you do want that, just hit enter. And there we go, it's done. So what do we want to do with this? If we do curve Boolean, and I'm going to drag from right to left, and everything I touch is going to be selected. Remember, left to right, anything contained in the window is selected. So we're going to contain it all and go curve, Boolean. And now we're going to click inside the regions we want to keep. Well, here we go. Let's go with all regions. And this time we're going to tell it to delete all of them because we don't want to have to drag all this off. Now let's see. I want to go here, here. So I'm just going to start clicking around here. I like this. Okay. Is this what I want? Maybe. Let's see. So these, you know, this is starting to get boring. Is this what I want? Look at how these like change size, these diamonds in between. Yeah. Maybe we'll do that for a little bit. But see how I have to like scroll in, pick all these. We have lots of triangles, that's for sure. You ever see those Facebook memes where they ask you, how many squares are in this image? This one would drive you nuts. How many triangles do we have? So I don't know, do I want to spend all day here clicking in these for you? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we just want to be real random about it instead of being real regular about a pattern. Let's just find some stuff like that. You know, right, this could be a pattern that starts out very organized and slowly descends into chaos. All right, there we go. That one kind of. All right. All right, so I'm going to stop that right there and say enter. And this is what it gave me. Now, if I was going to cut this out of acrylic, I would need a piece. Let's see how big. Oops, let's go here. I'm going to use a command called bounding box. This is going to be helpful when you're trying to estimate your materials. I'm going to say the output's going to be curves. That's fine. I'm going to hit enter. And up here, it's telling me that my dimensions. This is 21.494, 10 point, wow, that's 10 by 21. This isn't going to fit in our laser cutter bed. Oh, drats. What can I do about that? I can actually scale it down. Let's get rid of that bounding box. And maybe I'll scale it this way just a little bit. Let's see, how big are these openings? So do we know how to check distance? How do I know how big these openings are? If I go distance, I type in the command distance. I can also find this under the tools menu, but I can go here to here. That is a 1/2 inch. Okay, that's probably okay. Can I do an opening of a 1/4 inch? This should be a 1/4 inch. Yeah, 2.62. That'll be all right. The laser cutter could handle this. It's a 1/4 inch wide. So I could take this. Now let's do the bounding box again and see how big of a piece of acrylic I need for this. Output is curves, yes. And up here I need 15 across and 10 high. Our laser cutter bed is, I believe, 12 by 16. So this would fit, but I want to tell you, it'll fit just barely. I would probably scale that a little more in. I'm going to go scale. And then the base point of my scale is going to be right here on the corner. The scale factor is going to be here. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to drag it in a little. I'm going to turn off that center O snap. It can be a pain when you're not actually using it. There we go. I better check these distances again and see if the laser cutter can handle it. Distance. I'm going to go from here to here. That's about 1/4 inch, which is what I was thinking. That should be all right. Let's see here. These guys are small too. That's almost 1/2 inch. So we're all right. This should still be, that's 0.18. That's below 1/4 inch. 0.181. You know how I would really check this? I like to see things in my hands. Number one, I could take a ruler and hold it up against the screen here until my inches here match the ruler that I have in my hand. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is I can print it to a regular 2-dimensional printer, a paper printer. And here I've got HP. This is my home printer. We can do this in the lab too, but I'm printing out of the top viewport. And what I want, but look what it does. The scale here that it's showing on the paper. This is an 8.5 piece of a letter size piece of paper, which is 8.5 by 11. So in order to scale that to fit, we want it to be 1:1. Wow, that's the actual size. So let's make this landscape. It still doesn't all fit. But I'm going to go and set the window here for the edges. I'm going to hit enter. And I would print this out and take a look at it and go, do I think the laser cutter will be able to handle this? Yeah, maybe it would. And if I hit print right now, it'll come out on my printer and I could take a look at it in my hand. I'm not going to do that right now because my printer's down in the basement. I don't feel like running down the steps and leaving you guys. The other thing is we'll be able to use this when it comes time to look at the size of our rings, to look at whether or not they're likely to fit our finger. Quite often we can get so involved in Rhino, and because it's so easy to scale in and out, you can very quickly lose track of how big the things are that you're measuring or that you're modeling. And that's where the calipers come in handy. It's super important to have calipers and be able to reference them often so that you know what it is that you're, the size of the things that you are modeling. They're also helpful because when we get to the point that we're going to be measuring our fingers, it isn't a question of just putting on ring sizers and saying, oh, I'm a size 5 and putting a size 5 in there. That's, your size 5 may not be the same as somebody else's size 5. Throughout the jewelry industry, it has not been a priority for the jewelry industry to create very consistent sizes. And you also will notice that there are different sizes in Europe than there are in the United States and Canada. So what you want to do is you want to measure. You always want to measure your hands, your wrists, your necklace. You want to think about the size of the body that you're designing for, and not think in general terms so much. And that's what we're going to do with Project 2. And we'll talk about measuring your fingers later, but we're going to measure your fingers not just with ring sizers. We're going to use calipers and we're going to measure your hands so that your rings are going to fit you. So that's curve Boolean. This is a way of creating some designs. Some of you have options in your designs for Project 1 where you can put some engraving in. This might be a nice way to bring up some patterning for engraving. This is something that is really fun to use, and it's something that you can use mainly in curves. Then with curves, what can you do with curves? Later on, we can take them, just like we've been doing in the last couple of assignments, we can extrude them, and we can create solid things like this. Let's go to ghosted or rendered. There we go. Rendered, you can see how we have a, I really prefer ghosted. It's better as far as, color things. But we have because that was a group of stuff, because we extruded it all at once, we've got this nice solid object. We could play with that. That wouldn't actually make a bad ring. Let's think about that when we get to project 2. Do we have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen again. I do apologize for starting the recording without noticing I was sharing my screen. Thanks for pointing that out to me, guys. All right, it's about 10 to 2. Why don't we get back into working on our projects or our assignments that are due tomorrow night. Looks like everybody's keeping up pretty well with your assignments. And if anybody has any questions about specifically what's coming up, or if you need me to hold your hand a little bit through some of these commands, some of them aren't real obvious. Some of them you have to read the instructions a few times. And don't forget to do the assignments that are in between the ones that have to be submitted. It's really important to go through and do them all. The only ones that I recommend that you not bother spending any time on are the ones that involve rendering. And a lot of them will ask you to render at the end after it teaches you a modeling technique. Make sure you go through all the modeling techniques. Don't bother with the rendering. Just submit your 3DM file to me. We're going to get into rendering shortly after I bring project 2 to you, once we present your and introduce that project. Then we're going to start talking about using KeyShot, which is that's our rendering software that we use at MJCC. Metals Jewelry CAD CAM. That's us. All right, let's get back to those breakout rooms.